Good morning. Today's topic is endocrine tumors of the pancreas. So before going to the endocrine part, we'll first see about in general about the pancreas. So in this diagram, as you can see, this is the elongated pancreas, which is around 15 centimeters long and measuring about 60 to 140 grams in weight. Now, as you can see here, it is in close proximity to various structures. uh, the most important thing here is it is a retroperitoneal organ which lies within this duodenal curve, and it is close to the superior mesenteric artery and the portal vein. Now the anterior body of the pancreas touches the posterior wall of the stomach, and the posterior of pancreas touches the aorta, splenic vein, and the left kidney. As you can see here, the pancreatic neck overlies just the superior mesenteric vein and the artery. Here, inferior and laterally to the head of the pancreas, you can see there is the uncinate process. These are the minor and the major duodenal papillas, where the duct of the pancreas opens. The accessory duct opens into the minor papilla, and the main pancreatic duct opens into the major papilla. So we'll see about it in the further slides. We'll see in brief about the development of the pancreas. Basically, pancreas develops from the ventral and the dorsal bud, as you can see here, and the fusion of these buds form the whole pancreatic tissue. Before that, the ventral and the dorsal bud are present differently, and there occurs rotation of the buds, and then the fusion. So the ventral pancreatic bud, it rotates around 180 degrees and comes to lie with the dorsal pancreatic bud over here, and the fusion of both of these buds together give rise to pancreas. Now in the further this thing, you can see this is the view from the up. Here you can see the ventral bud and the dorsal bud. They are being rotated here. Rotation occurs first 90-degree, and then the ventral bud comes to lie with the dorsal bud. Now the duct is the main system which forms the exocrine part of the pancreas. So here, as you can see, this is the duct of the dorsal bud, and this is the duct of the ventral bud. Now, the major pancreatic duct is formed by the fusion of the distal portion of the main of the dorsal bud, duct of the dorsal bud, and the ventral and the duct of the this thing, uh, ventral bud. Okay, this fusion which is occurring, this is the major pancreatic duct, which is also called as a duct of Wersen. And here is the Santorini, duct of Santorini, which is the accessory pancreatic duct, which joins and pours its secretions into the minor duodenal papilla. This is the minor duodenal papilla, you can assume, and this is the major duodenal papilla. So after that, we'll before going to the endocrine part, we'll discuss about the exocrine part of the pancreas. The exocrine function begins after birth. The acini comprise 80% of the pancreas, composed of columnar to pyramidal epithelial cells with minimal stroma. And they are basophilic due to prominent rough endoplasmic reticulum. The pancreas produces about 2 liters per day of bicarbonate rich fluid, which contains many digestive enzymes, some of which are amylases, lipases, and proteases. So this is the low power view of the pancreas showing lobulated appearance. Now this may look similar to any exocrine gland, just like our parotid gland or submandibular gland. As you can see, multiple acini which are divided by this connective tissue septate. So it has a lobulated architecture, as you can see, and these are the acini which are present. These acini are responsible for the secretions of digestive enzymes, which gets poured into these ducts which are present. This is an intralobular duct, as it is present within the lobule of the pancreas. Some ducts can also be seen in the septae, uh, which we call it as interlobular ducts. So here, as you can see, the exocrine part of the pancreas, it comprises mainly about 80%. The rest is by the endocrine portion. The acini, as you can see, these are rounded structures which are blue color due to high RNA content, due to the high rough endoplasmic reticulum. As you go towards the luminal aspect, you can see it is more eosinophilic. It has got abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm. This is due to the presence of digestive enzymes which are there, and these acinar cells which are there, they have got zymogen granules in it. These zymogen granules secrete the digestive enzymes, and these zymogen granules basically have proenzymes which is in inactivated state, not in activated state. It is activated by stimulation from trypsin, and when it goes into the duodenum, uh, by enterokinases. So basically, these acini pour their secretions, which go through the intralobular ducts into the interlobular ducts, and finally into the main pancreatic duct, which carries it to the duodenum. Now here, as you can see, this duct is lined by simple cuboidal epithelium. It is an intralobular duct. So simple cuboidal epithelium, it secretes mainly bicarbonate-rich fluid, as we have seen here. And whereas the interlobular ducts which are there, they secrete mainly mucin. In the next slide here, we can see the intercalated duct, which is nothing but the intralobular duct, smaller in size and lined by simple cuboidal epithelium, surrounded by multiple acini. Uh, Now, these are both expressing the exocrine and the endocrine tissue. So this is the islet of the Langerhans, which consists of endocrine cells of the pancreas. So this is how the cells are arranged. On H&E section, you cannot identify the cells which are present, different types of cells, but they are present like this, in this manner. The beta cells majorly form the central part of the islet, which are present in majority, around 68%. Then comes the alpha cells, which line the periphery, and then the delta cells, PP cells, and serotonin cells. So this is the arrangement of an islet of Langerhans. The glucagon secretion begins by 7th week and insulin secretion by 10th week of fetal period. Okay, unlike the exocrine secretion which begins after birth, and it comprises just 1 to 2% of the pancreas, not more. It is a highly vascularized organ. As you can see, venous sinusoids are present. Now, why is this endocrine? Because it secretes hormones into the blood. So it has to be a highly vascularized tissue. This is again the islet of Langerhans. As I have already mentioned, you cannot identify the type of cells. It is surrounded by exocrine tissue, mainly the acinar cells. Now here what we see is they are polygonal to round shaped cells with salt and pepper chromatin. So as you can see here, they have got salt and pepper chromatin with inconspicuous nucleoli. The nucleoli is not that much prominent. And uh, and you can see that the cytoplasm is pale to eosinophilic cytoplasm, unlike the exocrine acinar cells, which have got intensely eosinophilic cytoplasm due to the zymogen granules. And yes, so this is the islet. So it was named after Paul Langerhans in 1869. Okay, he discovered the islet of Langerhans. He was a student of Rudolf Virchow, who is the father of modern pathology. And in his MD thesis, he studied about the anatomy of rabbit pancreas. His description about the islet of Langerhans was like this: small cells of almost perfect homogeneous content and of a polygonal form, with round nuclei mostly lying together in pairs or small groups. Now, further, Edward in 1893 coined this as islets of Langerhans. This is just the enumeration of the different types of cells secreting their characteristic uh, hormones. So this is alpha, cells which secrete glucagon, the beta cell secreting insulin, delta cell secreting somatostatin, the D1 secreting vasoactive intestinal peptide, enterochromaffin cell secreting serotonin, G cell secreting gastrin, and PP cells secreting pancreatic polypeptide. Now, somatostatin acts as an antagonist to insulin and glucagon. So further, we see there are tumors which are functionally classified according to the hormone secretion, like insulinomas, glucagonoma, somatostatinoma. So this function of the hormones is very important to know about the disease. So glucagon is basically, it increases the blood sugar level, insulin. It causes hypoglycemia in case of tumors where there is excess production of these hormones. And in somatostatin, it inhibits both insulin and glucagon. Vasoactive intestinal peptide, it causes increased GI fluid secretion, which can lead to diarrhea and various other symptoms. Then serotonin is there, gastrin is there. Gastrin, in gastrinomas, you can see excess gastric acid production. Uh, and then there is pancreatic polypeptides. Now coming basically to our topic, the neoplastic lesions, we have dealt with the normal histology. Now these neuroendocrine tumors are classified according to grade 1 as grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3. And then comes further the neuroendocrine carcinomas. So these neuroendocrine tumors are first we classify and then the carcinomas. There is a separate group which is called as Menins. This is the short form, which is nothing but the mixed neuroendocrine and non-neuroendocrine neoplasms. So on histopathology, we do not give this classification of insulinoma, gastrinoma, glucagonoma. This is just the functional classification as the patient presents. So it causes the symptoms of hormone production as we have discussed. Non-functional NETs, that is neuroendocrine tumors, they do not cause symptoms of hormone overproduction, which comprise of poorly differentiated neuroendocrine carcinomas. Risk factors being the syndromes, the multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1 syndrome, von Hippel-Lindau syndrome, neurofibromatosis, and tuberous sclerosis complex. Genetics also plays a role. There is loss of heterogeneity at chromosome 11q in functional tumors, whereas at 6q in non-functional tumors. Also homozygous deletion or silencing of 5-CpG island methylation, which is seen in 90% of gastrinomas. Now, just in short about this, the symptoms which are seen by in insulinoma, it causes low blood sugar. The symptom it is called as Whipple's triad, which comprise of low blood sugar less than 50 mg per dl, causing neuroglycopenic symptoms like palpitations, confusion, weakness, tremors, and visual changes. And when you administer glucose, the symptoms are relieved. So this is also known as Whipple's triad, which comes in insulinoma, gastrinoma. It can be associated with Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, which is hypersecretion of gastrin, which causes ulcers in the duodenum, in the stomach, and in the intestine. Then coming to glucagonoma, it secretes glucagon. The typical thing which is seen is dermatitis. There is migratory necrolytic erythema, which can be seen along with diabetes. VIPoma, then it causes profuse watery diarrhea, which is also called as pancreatic cholera, and dehydration and other electrolyte abnormalities. Somatostatinoma causing diabetes and fatty stools, gallstones. So this is the clue in the history basically. This triangle is Passaro's triangle, which is seen in gastrinoma. Okay, it is formed by the junction between the head and neck of the pancreas, between the head and the neck of the pancreas here, and between the cystic duct and the common bile duct. And the third point here is the second and third parts of the duodenum. It forms a triangle, which is again a clue in the history, showing that it is a gastrinoma. Glucagonoma shows this migratory necrolytic erythema. Gross findings. Now coming to the gross findings of our pancreatic endocrine tumors. So the color of the tumor basically depends on the amount of the stroma which is present and the amount of the vascularity which the tumor has. Now it is solitary, mostly it's solitary and homogeneous, tan yellow to red, hemorrhagic or necrotic foci can also be seen, may contain calcium and bone, and cystic appearance is seen especially in Men's syndrome. Coming to the histopathology, generally these tumors have got small, relatively uniform cuboidal cells with centrally located nuclei and acidophilic or amphophilic finely granular cytoplasm. On the other hand, in the below picture, as you can see here, pleomorphism can be seen. Significant pleomorphism can also be seen, which is rare, which is occasional, but it has got no clinical significance as such. Now, the characteristic pattern which is seen of the nucleus is a salt and pepper chromatin type of pattern, which is nothing but finely granular chromatin. And the nucleoli is not evident, as you can see in this picture. In these photos also you can appreciate the salt and pepper chromatin. Now these are not of pancreatic origin. This is pheochromocytoma and this is small intestine, but still these neuroendocrine tumors have got this characteristic salt and pepper chromatin type of nucleus wherever you can see them. There is characteristic amyloid deposition, not just in insulinoma, but in all other variants. You can see the deposition of eosinophilic amyloid in between the tumor cells. Now, IAPP is nothing but islet amyloid polypeptide, which is secreted by the beta cells along with insulin. In this picture also, you can appreciate the amyloid deposition. Now, it is mostly a solid tumor. It is highly cellular with less amount of stroma. But occasionally you can see tumors such as which are very stroma rich. These are again the patterns of the tumors. Mainly they are seen as solid diffuse tumor cells along with less stroma. Then these are trabecular. They can be trabecular or in cords. And this is the acinar or pseudoglandular pattern. Now, there are also morphologic variants which are involved in neuroendocrine tumors, which are clear cell type, the oncocytic, spindled, and Samoma bodies, which is calcification. Now, this clear cell lipid-rich type of morphologic variant, it resembles the clear cell renal cell carcinoma, RCC. So you can misdiagnose this as renal cell carcinoma. As you can see, they have got foamy microvesicular cytoplasm here. The typical nuclei which is present in neuroendocrine tumors is not present here. They are not of salt and pepper chromatin type, and therefore you can misdiagnose this tumor as clear cell RCC. So IHC is important. Again, you can do PASS. So PASS shows negativity as there is no glycogen which is present. Now, in case of RCC, this RCC can metastasize to the pancreas, causing this type of variant. So it is important again to do the IHC, including chromogranin and synaptophysin, which will detect the positivity of pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor. And the most common site which the RCC metastasizes to is the pancreas. So again, it is of very important significance. The oncocytic variant which is there, you can see abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm here. It resembles more like the hepatocellular carcinoma. So it should not be misdiagnosed as primary hepatocellular carcinoma. This is the oncocytic change. Then you can also see the spindle change, and then calcification may be present as Samoma bodies, which are concentric lamellated calcified structures. Another morphologic variants may include increased mucin production and black pigmentation due to lipofuscin type of granules. Then the poorly differentiated NETs. These are the most malignant ones. They are they come in under grade 3. So they are basically divided into large cell and small cell type. We'll come to the grades of this. Before that, we'll just see about large cell and small cell type of NETs. So this large cell type has got a prominent nucleoli. The cells are generally large with moderate amount of cytoplasm, and they have got a prominent nucleoli. Sometimes you can see brisk mitotic activity as well in this, which is greater than 30 per 10 high power field. And also extensive necrosis can be seen. Here you cannot appreciate much, but extensive necrosis can be seen. Versus the small cell type, it resembles more like our neuroendocrine tumor, the small cell type. As you can see, extensive necrosis, which is present over here. And then coming to the cells, these are smaller cells. They have got high nuclear cytoplasmic ratio along with scant cytoplasm. The nucleoli which are there, they are coarse, you can say they are coarse salt and pepper chromatin type. Generally, the cells are small and round. So this is the small cell type. One more important thing to remember in small cell type is the nuclear molding which is present, which is seen in small cell type of tumors. So nuclear molding is nothing but the conforming of the adjacent nuclei to one another, which is the wrapping of the nuclei around one another. You can see the groups of like a group of nuclei. So that is seen in small cell tumor. The more common variety is actually large cell type. Coming to the grading of the neuroendocrine neoplasms, it is divided into 3 grades, and then the third grade also has the poorly differentiated, as we have discussed here. So the first grade, first 3 grades are well differentiated, and then we differentiated according to the mitotic count and Ki67 index. Okay, the Ki67 now is basically a nuclear stain. So Ki67 positivity is assessed to grade these tumors. Uh, Ki67 thus becomes the marker of cellular proliferation and also helps in prognosis of the neuroendocrine tumors. So here in grade 1, we can see it is less than 2 mitosis per 10 high power field. This is important, per 10 high power field we have to see, grade it as. Then Ki67 is less than 3, coming to grade 2, 2 to 20, and Ki67 is 3 to 20. Grade 3 is greater than 20, both mitosis and Ki67. In neuroendocrine carcinoma, poorly differentiated, they have got similar grading like the grade 3 well differentiated tumors. But the morphology is different, as we have discussed in the previous slide. Now this is the grading by Ki67, grade 1 showing less than 3. Then grade 2, 3 to 20 can be seen. Grade 3 neuroendocrine tumor, here you can see greater than 20, and grade 3 neuroendocrine carcinoma is much bigger. Positivity is seen. So it is a nuclear stain. It is almost greater than, very much greater than 20%. So these are all tumors, but this thing is a carcinoma. Again, the same thing, which is much greater than 20, Ki67 positivity. Staging, anatomic and clinical, we can say stage 1 to stage 4. First, it is localized, and then in stage 2, it is more advanced. In 3, it is spreading to the lymph nodes. In stage 4, it spreads to the distant sites like liver and bone. Clinical stage, localized, primary tumor, regional lymph nodes. And liver limited metastasis can be seen, that is, the spread is only to the liver, widely metastatic, spread to multiple different sites. Coming to the most important part, by immunohistochemistry, there is so much morphologic variations in all these types of neuroendocrine tumors that it becomes difficult to identify and classify them on histopathology. So IHC is very important, the most important being chromogranin and synaptophysin. Then we have NSE proconvertases, which convert the propeptides into peptides. Most important, including PC1, PC3, and PC2. The NCAM or CD56 neural cell adhesion molecule. The CD57 is there, which is LEU7. HNK1, and this recent one is the synaptic vesicle protein 2, which is used nowadays. Now coming to chromogranin, yeah, here you can see chromogranin. Now chromogranin is basically present in the secretory granules, okay, of neuroendocrine cells. So you can see the chromogranin positivity. Actually, chromogranin is positive in a number of other tumors as well. So you have to use broad spectrum IHC in neuroendocrine tumors and not just rely on one chromogranin or synaptophysin. So chromogranin, it is present, as we have said, in secretory granules. It is positive normally in neuroendocrine cells, uh, normally in neuroendocrine cells, as well as in pancreatic islets, we can see, and parathyroid chief cells and thyroid C cells as well, normally. But in tumors, chromogranin positivity can be seen in neuroendocrine hyperplasia, then paraganglioma, and obviously neuroendocrine tumors and carcinomas. Also in Merkel cell carcinoma of the lung. So it is positive for a lot of other tumors as well. So coming to synaptophysin, it is more consistent and diffusely spread. Now synaptophysin, unlike chromogranin, it is present mainly in the cytoplasmic vesicles, as you can appreciate here, and not and rather than the secretory granules. It is present in cytoplasmic vesicles. So this is synaptophysin positivity. Now chromogranin can also, I missed one point about chromogranin. It can also be called as parathyroid secretory protein 1, and therefore its positivity is also seen in parathyroid chief cells. Synaptophysin positivity, it is expressed at gene P1123 and P1122. So this is the main thing. After IHC, we can do in situ hybridization and PCR. The localization of the mRNA for specific peptides and other neuroendocrine markers can be done by ISH. Some neuroendocrine neoplasms may contain mainly the mRNA, but not the translated product. So detection of mRNA within the cells can be done. But most NETs, as they express the IHC techniques, we can mainly rely on IHC. The molecular studies, there is defect. The main thing you have to remember is defect in the MEN1 gene. There is mutation in DAX and ATRX gene. Then the PTEN and alteration in mTOR pathway. Now, coming to the differential diagnosis of neuroendocrine, pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor, will it includes basically all the pancreatic neoplasms, primary pancreatic neoplasms, which is acinar cell carcinomas, pancreatoblastoma, and solid pseudopapillary neoplasm. So we'll just see the main points about this. So neuroendocrine tumor, it occurs in fifth decade. As we have already discussed, the typical NE chromatin and nucleoli is not prominent, and amyloid deposition. Then IHC shows positivity for chromogranin, synaptophysin. It is negative for trypsin, chymotrypsin, and keratin also shows positivity. Nuclear beta-catenin and PR may show positivity in neuroendocrine tumor. In coming to the acinar cell carcinoma, it occurs in sixth decade and childhood. Now, the important point here is cherry red nucleoli can be seen. The prominent nucleoli can be seen in acinar cell carcinoma. It shows positivity for trypsin and chymotrypsin, along with chromogranin and synaptophysin again. But the positivity for this is very focal or seen in scattered cells for acinar cell carcinoma. Then pancreatoblastoma, morphologically, you can see morules which are squamoid corpuscles. It occurs in the first decade and adulthood. Chromogranin and synaptophysin positivity along with trypsin and chymotrypsin is seen. So everything is positive in pancreatoblastoma. And also one special thing is nuclear beta-catenin positivity. Then solid pseudopapillary neoplasm. It shows hyaline globules, hyaline cytoplasmic globules and longitudinal nuclear grooves, along with positivity for synaptophysin, PR, nuclear beta-catenin, and keratin positivity may be focal. So imaging, coming to the imaging, we can use CT scan, MRI, and endoscopic ultrasound. The functional scans are more important, including gallium, DOTA-knock, PET, DOTA-TATE, and DOTA-knock. The octrio scan is rarely performed nowadays. Mainly functional scans are performed to detect the tumors. FDG PET can also be performed. So here is the detection of the tumor by all these scans. Then surgical resection is the mainstay, depending on the size of the tumor and the extent of metastasis. Enucleation, distal pancreatectomy, Whipple's, depending on the tumor size and location, can be done. And prognosis is good when complete resection is performed. Somatostatin analogs can also be used, like octreotide and lanreotide, as these neuroendocrine tumors express the somatostatin receptors. So we can also make use of this. Uh, yes, so the references are from Ackerman and Sternberg, and two important personalities which succumb to this neuroendocrine tumors. These are Irfan Khan and Steve Jobs.